How's it going, everybody? This is State of Exile, episode 58, Design Insights with GGG Rory. That's the title. That's the first time I'm reading it. Ziggy made it, so thanks, Ziggy. That was pretty good. Rory, that was just as ad-lib as you. It was brilliant. Thanks for coming on the show again, man.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So this is your third time on the show, and each time you come on the show, it seems you have a different job. So for everybody out there that doesn't know what you do, because I don't think I know what you do anymore, what is your job at Grinding Games currently?
I do skill design, boss design, and work on the leagues, the 3-month leagues, as well as just any major design stuff I'm involved with. Although that's really pretty much everything I do is working with other people, but those are the ones that I'm sort of in charge of.
So we have done a little bit of unique design together of late as well, haven't we, with the community unique?
Yeah, that's actually the first community unique I've done in a long time. But yeah,
the first unique in general.
I do a few uniques where I feel like there's space missing in the game, but things like just generally these days it's just big uniques when I have a crazy idea that I can get past a programmer. That's when I get a unique, like the Whispering Ice, for example.
Yeah,
it's probably the most memorable recent one.
Love that unique. I played too much and people always criticize me for it. I don't care. I love it. So in case people didn't know previously, Rory is now working primarily with the 3-month leagues, correct? That is like what you're dabbling in with most?
That's just definitely what I'm spending the most time on at the moment. Yeah.
And previously you were the passive skill tree guy, you were the unique guy, and now you're the Ascendancy guy, and officially it's the 3-month league. So there's just you pretty much are the game at this point in time. I can't think of anything else to describe you. You have become one with Path of Exile.
Pretty much all of those things are there are multiple people involved with it. So it's just I happen to try and get my finger in every pie I can reach. So yeah,
delicious.
Mm-hmm.
So let's discuss what today we're going to be going over. So obviously he works with everything, so we're going to try and do a little bit of everything. So we're going to discuss ascendancy trees in specific that Rory helped with. You know, the changes to the Slayer, the Assassin, some couple bugs such as the Raider, and we can even talk a little bit about the Chieftain, because that's what Ziggy and I have been playing. Mm-hmm. Prophecy design, the idea behind the 3-month league prophecy. Discussing a little bit of unique balancing, a little bit of the teaser of the belt Ziggy and Rory have been making, and last but not least, a little bit of hype from 2.4. What Rory can talk about and made it very specific. The only thing he could talk about 2.4 is how channeling skills work. In specific, he mentioned to me Flame Blast. I don't know about any others, so just Flame Blast. He's the only one he mentioned thus far. So let's kick things off with Ascendancy Design. Ziggy, you played, and I quote, the ass reacher, so the floor is yours.
And I have to first officially apologize for that, but I hate names like that, but I ended up doing it anyway. I couldn't think of anything else, and, well, YouTube cash money. Funny story about that, actually. So my girlfriend's mom sends me a text message one day, and she's like, "What's this ass feature thing?" Because she knows about my YouTube, and she texts me about that, and I'm like, oh my god. What do I tell her? I'm like, just a bit of a goof. So, yeah.
What is the ass reacher? What is it abbreviated for?
It's Assassin Reach of the Council.
So two really popular things right now. So Rory,
yes.
We get to discuss Reach of the Council. Are you ready?
Sure. Reach of the Council and Voidheart, I believe it was, are interesting because they were the ones that right at the end, like a day or two before release of Prophecy, we were like, this isn't powerful enough. We just need to raise its power a little bit. And
well,
it went overboard a bit, just a little bit. So yeah, that's the example of when you don't have enough balance testing on something and you make a knee-jerk reaction. And there's always something like that every patch where we just buff something a little bit too much. I think Parandus was the only one that I can remember that didn't have anything that was too crazy with that, just because we were being extra careful with that league because we didn't have enough time on it, so we kind of just nerfed everything that could be dangerous, while Prophecy were like, no, we can handle a little bit of power. So that's where Reach of the Council came in.
It's like, how much craziness can we tolerate after the release of this? How game are we feeling?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, it just also in the last few days when everyone's tired and working for the game for so much, maybe our judgment is impaired a little. But if someone just says the line, it's just a league unique, and then everything goes downhill from there. So
I'm curious what the previous versions of Voidheart and Reach were. Can you remember what changes you made to those to buff them from what they were before?
I can't remember the exact things on Voidheart. I think it was just it didn't have the bleed stat. It was just the poison, and it may have even been all poison, and we changed it to melee poison or something like that. But yeah.
So it almost wasn't a melee thing because, like, I think like the prevailing idea is that everyone's kind of saying that it's a bit of a fix for melee because it's a melee only thing that's very powerful and helps bring the power level up of melee. So interesting to think that it might not have initially been intended as melee only.
Yeah. I think it's a while ago now, but I think the process was it's too good to have it global poison. It's not good enough to have just melee poison. Like we weren't seeing the numbers we wanted from that, so we put, considering that how tricky it was to actually get it, and the fact that you need the math, I believe it is, to actually get it to create. It's it's an in-game unique in that regard.
The crazy thing is, Voidheart is one of the most complained about uniques because of its overpoweredness. Yet it almost was designed for ranged play. Can you imagine if we had both Reach of the Council and Voidheart this league? No one would play melee. Like, why would you ever play melee?
I mean, I basically felt like I did with Assassin, so
yeah,
I mean,
that's crazy.
So, I still ask myself that question: why would I play melee when I have Reach of the Council Assassin? So good. So I guess on that topic then, how about that Assassin Poison Bleed node change? So Assassin was already considered to be pretty strong. Do you mind talking us through the addition of the Poison Bleed?
No one was taking that node or that path at all. It was just completely untaken, and so we just wanted it so that melee crit had a reason to be the Assassin, really. We weren't seeing it previously, so we decided to push it a bit. And it was almost, again, a melee-only thing, but we decided we should make it a bit more global. And, turns out that makes it quite a bit more powerful for the ranged builds. But,
I appreciate that. It works very nicely with Tornado Shot and Fizz builds. Oh, it's so good.
A lot of the Ascendancy changes we made we'll push the power a little bit to see, like, if the values are too high at the end of this, then we can lower it down. But if the values are too low, then that's another league of no one taking those nodes, and those classes feeling like they only have one path. We really wanted to make it so that even though, I mean, we didn't try and balance the numbers for the Ascendancy classes. We didn't try and make it so that there are as many Chieftains as there are Assassins. But we did try and make it so there are as many people taking this path on the Assassin as that path on the Assassin. And so the Slayer, you definitely see a bunch of that where we tried to make every path more valuable rather than just making a few super nodes. Yeah.
So I think the Slayer was a big success too. Go ahead, Zeno.
All right, so before we go into Slayer, I want to talk about Reach of the Council. What are your thoughts about Reach of the Council in terms of, you don't have to tell me if it's getting nerfed or it's going to the core of the game. What is your honest opinion about Reach of the Council in terms of its power level, Rory?
Honestly, there are people working, other people in the staff that have a lot more knowledge and care a lot more about it. So I haven't really thought too much about it because they're way more passionate about it. I know that I trust their opinion a lot more in that regard than my own. So
my thoughts on it is there is no need for any other bow in the game so long as it exists, unless it's a projectile skill that is AoE and not additional projectiles. You know, lightning arrow, tornado shot, split. You could just name them all. Anything that exceeds with +1 arrow is going to want this thing. You know, makes Harbinger seem obsolete, and Harbinger was the bow for a while. That's just my 2 cents on it, and I'm not saying it needs to be buffed or nerfed. I just think that when a rare bow ceased to exist because of one unique bow, perhaps questions should be raised.
Oh, yeah. I can say with relative certainty that it's going to get some balance changes, but I can't tell you I don't know what they are. So I assume just lowering the damage, but we'll see. You'll find out maybe, shortly after I found out, probably.
It seems to have what I kind of, I guess, term the Varanastra problem, where it covers so much ground in its niche that it kind of pushes a lot of other things to the side. How did you guys feel about Varanastra in that regard then? Because we might see kind of like we see a similar problem here with Reach the Council potentially.
The design direction of Varanastra was very different. It was very much meant to be in every weapon, and it was meant to be this mythic, legendary thing. We kept buffing its damage. Its damage started off a lot lower. We kept buffing it just because it didn't feel like the sort of superpower thing that it was supposed to be. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if it and when it comes back, if it will change at all. I don't know the answer to that either. But yeah, it's an very interesting weapon because of that.
All right, so as I've talked about previously in the podcast, the Slayer, first off, the rework is amazing. Perhaps maybe even too amazing, but that's my personal opinion. Did you specifically go back and change the Slayer, or did you work on that with somebody?
I worked on it with Neon, who, he pretty much, I work with him on almost everything these days. He's the most in touch of the designers with the in-game balance, and so that was pretty important to consider with these Ascendancy classes.
So the first thing I want to say is a 20% culling strike is absurd for single target. And I have a theory about how he's like, basically, if Marcus Linei didn't screw up in the lore, he would become the Slayer, the Ascended Slayer. That's my whole theory. We don't need to go into it. However, I think it is coincidence that he looks like a crab. He has a stun node. Everything that is crab related has Linei's tag in it. And he's the executioner. Like, every single Linei's item is executioning. You got Pierce, you got yourself, stun node, you have the crag fall, you have overpower. We could just go on forever. 20% cull. Headsman, a headsman's a slayer. I think it's one of the most brilliant ideas, and for once, melee can get area of effect. Now, perhaps things like Earthquake, it's a bit over the top, or even maybe Shield Charge, but things like Dual Strike can actually play Cleave. You can get quite a bit of AoE from this. What was your thought when going into increasing his AoE by 40% compared to every other melee class?
It was a tough call because we had been very careful with AoE previously. It would be a lot easier to make the call if it wasn't for Earthquake being so popular, but we've always known that we wanted melee to have more access to AoE, and Ascendancy classes seemed like a good place for it. It may be that we need to give the Marauder better access to some AoE on more of his options, but we saw this as a good opportunity to give AoE to melee classes for the melee classes using AoE skills that really wanted it.
Did you expect what ended up happening, where we have a lot of like spellcasters and other builds going for that Slayer just for that 40% AoE?
I think we secretly hoped that it would happen just because the idea of duelist spellcasters, just for that little thing, is pretty cool. And we always, like, every time we design an Ascendancy class, there's always that, and wouldn't it be cool if this person from a build that's usually on the other side of the tree went to it just for this one thing. So yeah, there's always that thought in the back of our mind, and we want this to be something that people are like, am I willing to pay the extreme cost of doing this for this reward? Whether the value, I mean, we always knew that the culling was perhaps a little bit extreme, but it was such a cool thing that it's like one of those moments where the coolness is so high that we can't, like, 18% culling doesn't sound anywhere near as delicious.
It's 20. So, and then not only that, you get a 20-second onslaught, which is just that uptime alone. If you can't kill something in 20 seconds, that's pretty special. It's just that node in itself is one of the strongest two pointers in the game. Which brings me to my next point. I want to discuss the Juggernaut. The one endurance charge gains 1,000,000, and literally whatever your maximum is, you gain. Obviously, I was being a little bit exaggerative there. Did you end up working on that one as well, that node?
Yep. We went through 20 different versions of what we could put on that node, because we knew we wanted something to make endurance charges, like the Juggernaut to be the endurance charge guy. However you want to use those endurance charges. It was a tough call because we knew that there would be some builds that would just take too much advantage of it. Yeah. But the number of builds that opened up as possibilities made it worth it in a way.
I'm sure you can guess what I'm alluding to here. Discharge in specific. Discharge, gain 1, expend 1 power charge, gain 10, Mjolnir, Molten Strike, Vol's Devotion. We could go on Kingsguard. We could just keep adding to this. What is your entire thought process and how the game is becoming in specific with that node in Discharge?
It's tricky. We know we want to make some changes to Cast on Crit, which is obviously a big part of that. A big, one of the biggest uses of Discharge, and we almost can't buff Discharge or can't improve the mechanics of Discharge while Cast on Crit remains as it is, and to a lesser extent other triggered effects. But I'm pretty sure everyone on the design team has a different opinion of what they want Discharge to be. I know that if I got the chance to rework it, it would be very different from if anyone else did that. So it's really hard to say what we'll actually do. But I know, but that also makes it really hard to change, because most people are like, I'd rather leave it as it is than change it to a plan that isn't my own plan. So it's kind of tricky.
In my personal opinion, it's like Cast on Crit, with the exception of maybe Bladefall Poison, it's pretty balanced. And Discharge by itself, self-cast, is pretty balanced. But when you put the two together, the world explodes. Or if you put it with Mjolnir with Vol's Devotion, it's just through the roof. And that is probably a nightmare to balance. And I commend you for even trying to touch that. And has there been talks at all in the office in specific to Discharge at all?
There has. Every now and then someone comes up with a plan and it goes around the office and we think hard about it. But changing the existing skill is really, really tricky. Not so much from a coding perspective, but from we have builds anchored around the current place. Like, people can no longer play their characters that they've got to level 90 something because we change a skill if we change it too much. This is why Shield Charge took so long to get changed, because we wanted to change it right. We wanted a result that people can use and that we aren't just destroying whatever you were doing previously.
Yeah, I think in particular with Cast on Crit Discharges, that's kind of like a build niche that there are people who only play that, and every season play that again and again and again. And like, that's one of the strongest kind of instances of that, I feel, especially after having just recently played that myself now. I kind of get it. Like, I get why people every league just make another Cast on Crit Discharger and they keep going that. And I think that probably people leave the game if it kind of changed and, if their build didn't really work anymore.
Yeah, so when we change it, we don't want to change it. We want to change it, but we don't want to change it so that it ruins that feeling. We can lower the power level, but the feeling of it and the play style is really unique and something we want to keep around. Even if, it just make it so that it's not the frame rate and content destroying tool it is now.
Frame rate and content destroying, I like that. That's pretty accurate.
So on the positive note, I wanted to bring up the Chieftain. We've seen some really cool mechanics that the Chieftain introduced, such as Totem Leech. Normally, traps and totems couldn't leech at all in the game, and now we have a way to generate health from a damage source that is not our own. I'm assuming there was new coding you had to write, and whose idea was that? Because in my opinion, that's brilliant.
We had talked about a lot of, when we were discussing all the changes to the Assassin and the Slayer, we talked about the Chieftain, and all the time we go to the main gameplay programmer and say, here's an idea, almost certainly can't be done, can we do it? And he's like, no, it's too time consuming. It's going to cause too many problems down the road. And we absolutely thought that this was going to be one of those things. We just threw it out there. Like, we'd had a similar thought in the past, but we're like, nah, almost certainly having your totems cause you to leech is just insane. We can't imagine the technical hurdles. And the gameplay program was like, yeah, it's doable. It's fine. We can try it. And so we're like, well, why not then? We don't get a chance to have something that to us is mechanic breaking like this very often, so we wanted to try it out, and limiting it to the way that we limited it makes it really interesting. I think a good save.
Pause a sec.
Try it out.
Skype was dying. You mind repeating that last sentence?
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's about now.
What was I saying? Okay, cool. I forgot what I was saying. Oh yeah, it was a tough call. I mean, we thought it was going to be an impossible mechanic, and so knowing that it was possible made us want to try it. And yeah, I think it worked out pretty well. I don't know if we'll ever introduce it again on anything else because it's such a special thing for that class to have. It's sort of like the equivalent of giving it +1 totems. It instead gets this incredibly defensive totem mechanic. Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool for the Ascendancies to have things that are pretty unique and exclusive to them. Like he could in a year's time have a unique for each Ascendancy that gives its unique flair to anyone else, but that kind of might lose the whole flavor of Ascendancies then if you go down that route.
Yeah, one of the advantages of Ascendancies is that you can feel like only your class can do this. So yeah, we don't want to give 20% culling to everyone. That's for sure.
What are you talking
Same
about? That's
for
what
other
everyone
mechanics.
wants. I mean, what's 20% cull when I honestly what I see right now, Rory, is that the game is becoming more and more centralized around how fast can you use Whirling Blades and can you explode it in 1 second. And that's like Elementalist, Cast on Crit, Discharge in general is how fast can I make my Whirling Blades and can I detonate everything in a split second? That's honestly what the meta is becoming. And anything that is not comparable to that, I feel is like, what's the point in playing because you'll just get criticized.
I mean, yeah, you have to. It's very hard whenever we introduce any new mechanic or item or skill to not balance around those builds as well, because that's what everyone on the QA team is accustomed to playing, because they're playing the builds that can get them through the content most efficiently. Especially on hardcore, where you don't want to have to play a slow build that might get you killed because it's slightly slower. So you will play what you know is good. So it's the kind of thing of, if we nerf everything, then suddenly you'll feel like the game is terrible because you're used to being insanely awesome. And if we make everything that powerful, then creating content that's challenging, like we can't just keep boosting monster life, because then every other build that doesn't utilize exponential mechanics is completely worthless. It's a really tough call where we need to be very careful and take baby steps.
And we're at the point now where we have, so for instance, the Chieftain with strength, you get so many increases where a multiplier does so much, and everything's a multiplier in this game. Or you have so many multipliers and so much flat damage from Discharge where it's like the exponential values are just starting to become ridiculous. And I'm sure with this Ascendancy, that is the definition of power creep. And we're treading down a dangerous road. Or is that the road that GGG wants? That's really what I'm ultimately going at. What is the vision, from your perspective, of the Ascendancy design?
The goal of Ascendancy Design isn't really anything about balance. It's about build diversity. We want to create build diversity with it, and then we balance the game around that. And so creating content balanced around people having Ascendancy class. Like now we are finally creating new content, with this next expansion, that is, we're building the content with the Ascendancy classes in mind, with the current power of builds in mind, which might mean other content gets shifted to match the same level. Or it might be that we adjust the builds down so that this content doesn't feel so different from other content. Not so much harder, but different. We're not boosting monster life on any new stuff that we're creating much further. Instead, we're making it so that the things that we're creating play around how the players are playing with their Ascendancy classes, with their large burst damage and so on.
Understood. So I understand 2.4 is specifically endgame, and we can't really go into, Chris mentioned that 2.4 was the endgame rework, and you can't really spoil anything. So now that we've had our damage, 2.4 is specifically around how we handle our damage with the monsters, correct? Because this league we can, we're kind of segueing to prophecy design here. You completely retuned a core group of the original monsters from Act 1. The goats actually do something now. The Spark Skeleton specific will destroy you in a Necropolis map if you're not paying attention. Are we expected to see maybe more of that design in the future?
I would hope so. We really need to have a big design meeting and consider how successful it's actually been, whether it's worth investing the time and having more of that stuff. The main goal of those changes was to make Cruel and Merciless feel different from normal difficulty by introducing the new mechanics at that point. And so we'd like to push that a bit further so that it does feel like a new game when you get to even better if we can make Merciless feel like a different game from Cruel when you play through it. So they're different experiences with different levels of challenge, not just different levels of damage and life.
How are you feeling about the new skills from the new monsters so far? Because I really like the idea of that, but I felt like this particular batch of them wasn't as impactful as I hoped. There's a couple of them you notice, like a fully wheeled up Vortex that jumping at you is pretty gnarly, but I was kind of hoping for a bit more impact from those guys myself.
Yeah, it's I haven't had enough experience with them myself. Like you say, I didn't notice it the few times that I did come across it. Too much, so it's hard to say. We were also being careful with this because we didn't want to. As soon as you get to Cruel, all these new players are finding that the game is alien to them and they're getting destroyed by stuff they weren't familiar with, or mechanics they didn't know how to play around.
Could be interesting to have like another tier that introduces itself in Merciless then, so it's a bit of a scaling up thing rather than all being dumped on you in Cruel, which as you said might be a little nasty.
We had more monsters planned as well that we weren't able to get ready in time, which I know they'll be going in the next patch, but things like having zombies with some special abilities. It's really tricky to give zombies threatening abilities for ranged characters.
What does a zombie do, right?
The last time I remember a zombie being threatening was when Athene died to Desync, aka Corrupting Blood, on Strand. Because they have such high base damage, Corrupting Blood was actually scary on them in Nemesis. But that was the last time I ever remember a zombie actually being terrifying.
Poison clouds and stuff on zombies, I think, are like the most creative things you can do with them. Like when they die, something bad happens. Like they release a noxious cloud of death.
In Invasion, they had the... What was it? Rise QT killed his party with the zombie from... was it Bloodlines, was it? Bloodlines mod? I forgot what it was. It was some kind of zombie cloud. He ended up killing his whole party from Dominating Blow. That was pretty nuts.
What about zombies that vomit chaos? Someone in chat said projectile vomiting zombies. That could be cool.
That's very D3. That's something you see a lot of in D3. It's hard to not draw the comparison if you're immediately seeing that.
Fair enough.
But vomiting is the fallback. It's always the fallback.
I haven't seen this in D3. Zombies hurling brains, so we could go more classic Romero style here with the zombies, a little over the top, maybe.
Why are they throwing away their own food?
That's true. Maybe stale ones in the interest. It's an investment in getting fresh brains.
We do want zombies to throw other zombies. That's something we've definitely wanted in the past. Where they just pick each other up and throw each other around. That is a real technical challenge. There's a whole bunch of problems that go wrong there.
That's a serious design and coding challenge there, it sounds like.
But, I mean, it'll be worth it one day when we have zombie Olympics.
Oh my god, this took an interesting turn.
That's Prophecy's design in a nutshell right there. So
that is a perfect example of a thing that we say to a programmer and they say no, and we go away sad.
Programming.
Is this what you guys do? Do you ever just go to work one day, instead of talking what you're going to do for 2.4, you just talk about these arbitrary things like Zombie Olympics?
It is very easy to get distracted working at a game.
I can imagine. The sky's the limit. You are the creator, therefore let's be stupid creative today, and that's too much. That's too much tinfoil.
Everyone's had those moments where they sit around a table with their friends, like eating some chips, and they're like, what if we made a video game? It'd have this, and it'd have this, and it'd have this. I imagine, game dev teams sometimes probably find themselves going off on that tangent, have what-if meetings.
It's really tricky because every time someone's like, what if, they're like, oh, that's going to be 40 hours of programmer time, 38 hours of art time. This is going to require 2 producers to work on it. And you're like, oh.
So all the fun gets ruined by man hours. Once man hours come up, there goes rip.
The zombie Olympics are worth it, though.
It is really a big thing to think about, but simply because, like, reworking Shield Charge, I could have made 3 new skills in the time it took to get Shield Charge, like the new Shield Charge, to the state that it is now.
Everyone loves it, so it was worth it. It was a good risk for reward, honestly. Shield Charge.
They might have loved those 3 skills they would have made instead even more.
Yeah.
You don't know.
That's a tough call to make, because new skills are like packageable, marketable content for you guys, and skill redesigns less so. But I mean, a lot of existing player base expects and desires skill reworks to make stuff usable.
Here's a good.
And,
Oh, go ahead, Rory.
I was just going to say, one of my big goals is to remove traps for new players, where a player comes across an elemental hit gem and says, "I'm going to try and use this," and then they leave the game because they have a horrible experience. They can't work out how to use it.
Oh god.
The answer is obviously make elemental hit great again. That's I mean that's a meme in itself, right?
Yeah.
All right.
If I thought shield charge was hard, elemental hit is a whole nother level.
The point I'm trying to make is, we had Vortex. Vortex is very strong from ZiggyD's experience, and he's going to touch up on Vortex and Frostbolt here in a little bit. And we also have Lacerate, which was not really talked about too much. It's strong in its own right, but shield charge is talked about a lot right now. So I think it was worth it. Despite, Lacerate and Vortex and Frostbolt coming out, shield charge still seems to be more meta than the newer skills that came out. So cheers. You should be proud of it. It's a good skill.
Well, Frostbolt and Vortex were pretty much Neon's babies, so he can take credit for those. But yeah, I'll take shield charge. It was a long time coming.
Yeah, hell yeah. Shield charge was the meme for a long time. Now it's the go-to. I would take that from 0 to hero.
Movement skills are a really tricky thing. Like, movement skills are too impactful in Path of Exile, really. Like, since shield charge and since Leap Slam and Whirling Blades existed, it's been too, players are getting faster and faster. We can't introduce more attack speed without, by doing so, introducing more movement speed because of this thing, and you spend more and more time people are spending more and more time with the movement speed flasks up. So one of the tricky things about one of the big design challenges is working out whether we can slow people down a bit in that regard. I've seen posts on Reddit and so on saying just add cooldowns to all the movement skills, make changes to movement skills so they're not this thing that's too crazy.
Yeah, how do you, it must be tough. Well, how do you feel about the idea of movement skills being clearing skills in general as well? Because that kind of is that same problem then, is having shield charge be your movement and your clear, right? Imagine if Whirling Blades was a skill that could kill packs. What would people use? Just Whirling
We saw
Blades?
this with Leap Slam way back in the day. Leap Slam went across the whole map and it destroyed everything. We can all thank Hellman for that. It's like shield charge Leap Slam 2.0 or Whirling Blades 2.0.
Yeah, it's really cool if people can do builds like that. It's sort of I'm going to invest heavily into a shield charge build or a leap slam build. It has great costs, but it pays off. You get to do something cool. You get to move faster while killing stuff than anything else. Is the goal. It's really tricky to get to that point though, especially with the benchmark. It's Whirling Blades is one of those skills we can't change without destroying how people play. And there are some people that want to play the Whirling Blades. That's how you do damage. And we can't just add a cooldown to it without ruining that. And we can't have Frenzy Charge overrides for every movement skill without causing problems.
Perhaps we make a straw poll about it. Would you mind making one of those, Rory? Like a community thought? Do we destroy Whirling Blades or do we keep Whirling Blades but change how it functions? Do you still want it fast? It's one of those things.
What people want and what the game needs might be very, very
well
different
said.
things.
Well said. I agree with that. You're the game dev, let you be the game dev. Cheers on that.
I'm glad you acknowledged the point where you have to stop listening to the community and do what you guys think is best for the game, because I think too many devs have lost their way with just listening to everything the community wants.
I completely agree.
Because often, people change their mind every couple of weeks about these things too. So,
and better never means better for everybody.
The reason why I'm bringing this up right now, guys, is in specific the Grand Spectrum Jewel. The Grand Spectrum was destroyed, but it even had a chance to live. Not saying it's a bad jewel, but that thing was hyped by Lifting Your Bro, and it didn't even get a chance to live its true potential because it was changed before we even got to test it. So things like this, cheers, Rory, on that comment. I appreciate it. We don't need another Grand Spectrum. Let you guys do your job. We need to trust your ability to do your job.
A little bit. I mean, yeah, we're capable of making mistakes, and the community calling us out on it keeps us honest. So, just don't be mean about it. We have feelings too,
Aww. You guys, you were talking about how you guys almost have the same problem that the community has, where you're playing the strong builds internally and testing with those. So then when you want to make changes, you want stuff that's going to compare favorably to that. And I feel like Frostbolt Vortex, in particular Vortex, stands out, was maybe an example of that in action, because it came out and I was looking at the skill and I was thinking that, well, okay, so it's like an AoE degen, kind of like if Ice Nova had like a degen effect to it, so it'll probably not hit as hard as Ice Nova. And then when it came out, it actually hits harder than Ice Nova and has that degen on top of it. So how does that kind of work out for you guys?
It's a tricky call. This is actually one of the things that I'm hoping to look at, although I don't know if it's going to be for this upcoming patch, is having it so that skills like that have a sharper, like skills like Ice Nova have a sharper damage progression, so that Ice Nova will end up being more effective later in the game, and Vortex will be, like, Ice Nova's area of effect is significantly larger than Vortex, I believe. But the degen of Vortex, well, I don't know about significantly. It's at least larger.
It's a little bit bigger.
yeah. But having like at the moment, the damage progression on a lot of skills is very similar, especially attack skills, but it also applies for skills like this, where things like Double Strike gets as much of a damage increase as something like Cleave or Earthquake does as the skill goes up in levels. And pushing it so that the skills that have smaller AoE or that require more support gems to be that level of AoE that you desire, having them have a sharper damage progression is definitely something we're looking at for future patches. And Ice Nova is going to be one of those examples, probably, where it's good early, it's not as good late, so therefore the damage progression should be a bit, it should get more damage much later in the game.
Kind of like raising up the the level 20 end of it, like that. Okay, I've seen that in a few instances with skills recently, and I figured that would be probably the end result there. So does that kind of like that effect like influence how you guys introduce those skills then? Because Vortex was introduced as being, well, significantly stronger than Ice Nova, and is that because of like you're playing and comparing favorably to the stronger stuff? I mean, because not many people are playing Ice Nova, right? So you're comparing more to other strong stuff.
Yeah, that was really like, we're introducing these new skills. We need to have them competitive with a certain level of other in-game builds, balance it around that. And although Ice Nova did get buffed a little bit, we didn't buff it. Like, we didn't redo the balance of it as we effectively were for Frostbolt and Vortex.
Okay, all right. I think because we're running a little tight on time, could we quickly touch on unique balancing before we talk about the channeling skill changes? So this is something I brought up with the community recently as well, and people were kind of pretty interested in discussing about this idea of like rebalancing old uniques. So in particular, unnerfing older uniques that have fallen from use. Either they didn't change, but the meta changed around them and they went from being strong to being very weak, or they were nerfed due to a previous game state. But since then, things have changed, and that nerf seems now unnecessary, especially because there might be stronger alternatives available now. So how do you guys kind of like approach that? Is that like a dev time issue mainly, or something you guys don't want to kind of touch yet?
We wanted to do it for Prophecy League when we were looking at a lot of the what are they called, fated uniques. There was a real, like, the more we looked at fated uniques, we're like, we should just rebalance all of these uniques and then do the higher level fated version on top of that, rather than, like, a lot of the initial fated unique designs were making bad uniques good. We decided that we needed to just rebalance stuff. We didn't have enough time before release. Rebalancing uniques takes QA time, and it takes balance testing time, as well as often when we say we want to rebalance something, we want to actually add a special cool new stat to it, to actually give it a place in the game, make it more unique. Seeing as a lot of the old uniques are very similar to a rare with a corrupted implicit or something like that is these days.
Yeah. You guys, that must be a particular struggle now because you're on that kind of like 3-month development cycle for expansions or mini expansions. Do you like ever kind of foresee yourself having that QA time to go back and look over these old uniques?
Oh, absolutely. But I don't think so for 2.4.0, especially, I'm going to be away for a bit, so it's not likely to happen for 2.4.0, but hopefully something with patches like the 3-month league only ones, although the league is a lot bigger in those 3-month cycles, we generally have a bit more time for balance, or for buffing than Yeah, we have time for buffing then and for nerfing for the like major expansion content.
You always have time for nerfing.
So, something I would like to talk when I talked to Rory here, we're only about a month and a half into the league, guys. So in terms of things 2.4, there's a lot Rory can't talk about today. However, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to try and go out. Ziggy and I are going to go out of our way to try and get a developer before 2.4. But what Rory said we could discuss for 2.4 is in specific to the way how channeling gems currently function. This is the hype of 2.4, and I'll try to get some more people who can discuss uniques in the next league and all that when the time comes. So Rory, what would you like to discuss about pre-existing channeling skills? I have no idea what it is. The floor is yours.
So in 2.4, we're going to be making a change.
Hold that thought. You're allowed.
Channeling was a big.
We're good now.
No.
Just
We're all
every
scared
now and
now.
then has a little bit of a moment.
That Kiwi internet, man.
Yeah,
Hold on.
can't hear what's going on.
Yeah, we're good now. I think we're good.
Okay.
Start again.
Okay. So in 2.4, we're going to have changes to channeling. Previously, it was like a very fast cast animation, which had a whole bunch of problems with it, and we had to disable a bunch of supports with it, just because they caused problems and looked silly. So now channeling will be actually you'll have a build up, you'll have a duration, and usually you'll just have a duration and an end. This is the biggest deal. Like, you won't notice too much with Incinerate. I don't think you'll notice any changes with Incinerate, but you will notice a change with Flame Blast. Flame Blast will just be a lot nicer to use because it will have a set endpoint as soon as you let go, so it'll immediately blow up when you, rather than having to take a move action in order to trigger it. So it'll just feel a lot better. So that's a noticeable change that you'll see, except for some new skills that will be also using this channeling system. But this mainly opens up an awful lot of design space for us. We can say things like, while you're channeling, you're also releasing pulses of an over, or you've got a defensive shield up, or something like that. We can have special, like make care about channeling as a mechanic. You might have a character who usually wouldn't use two skills from different elements or types together, but because they're both channeling skills, they can build around it. So we'll have uniques, ideally, that will make you more defensive or more aggressive while channeling, or something like that.
So that's the thing, right? Because I noticed that originally, like in like the game engine, channeling wasn't really a thing. It was more like kind of casting stages of a spell or something. I don't know how you guys coded in channeling, but it didn't really seem like the game had a channel feature. Really, you just kind of emulated it in some fashion. Is that true?
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Okay, I thought so. Kind of like looking at the way it worked. So this means that you're now making channeling an actual mechanic, right? Which means that you can create things that interact with channeling and skills that interact with channeling potentially as well.
Yeah, or supports or something like that. Yeah.
Does this mean that skills such as potentially Wither, Incinerate, and Lightning Tendrils will be affected by this change as well?
Wither and Incinerate will, but it won't be hugely noticeable. It'll just they'll behave pretty much the same as they were before. They might have a fraction of a second of a cooldown of a ending the animation at the end, so they look a bit nicer, and we'll balance them a little bit to compensate for that. But they will be using the new mechanics. They just won't, it won't feel any different really, because they're still stopping when you stop.
So how about Lightning Tendrils in specific? Because you didn't comment on that one. Is there anything you discussed with that skill?
That one isn't really channeling in the traditional sense. It is, you have a cast, and that cast has 4 points in it. It just
more like an echo, right?
Yeah. It's effectively quadruple echoed, and that's why it doesn't get affected by these changes at all. We might get a nice looking animation
still be
for it.
Lightning Tendrils is what you're
Yes.
Feels bad, man.
When we originally started, when we started work on Lightning Tendrils, it was a channeled skill. We tried to make it a channeled one for ages, but having it always forecast, having it quadruple echoed, made it have some skill to play rather than just being a hold down until everything dies. Incinerate has the skill of having the build up, and Flame Blast has the skill of knowing when to let go, but the original channeled Lightning Tendrils didn't have that. It was just a hold down and then let go. So that's why it's got that built-in quadruple cast. And so this won't be the way that we improve Lightning Tendrils when we improve Lightning Tendrils in game use.
So what you're saying is you're going to improve it later on then? That's all I have.
There is a desire to do something similar to Threshold Jewels. Maybe it will be Threshold Jewels, or maybe something just like that, an optional thing, or maybe even just a built-in thing for a lot of the skills that you get at level 2 and 4 and 12 that you want to be using later in the game that just aren't competitive.
It's potentially a good solution for that, because I know from talking to Chris, he was keen to have like kind of like a skill progression where you have weaker skills at the start of the game, and then you progress into stronger skills. So Lightning Tendrils could be an example of that. But then you have a way of at endgame making them an endgame skill again on top of that.
Yeah, you don't want it so that you feel like you have to use Cleave, the skill you get right on the start from at level 2 all the way through the entire game. You want it to feel like you do change it up, and then you settle on your build for a new player anyway. An experienced player perhaps get those Threshold Jewels if they know what they're looking for, or whatever it is that lets them use these skills throughout the game.
Yeah, gotcha. So on this channeling change again, like I think this is a pretty exciting change, especially when you mentioned that you can have things happen while channeling. So at the moment, like for example, when you're casting Flame Blast, right, the effect of your channeling is just that you're vulnerable for a moment, right? That's the price you pay to charge up this big, powerful, explosive skill. But you could have skills that channel defensively. Like you could have something that while you're channeling, you're having some sort of defensive effect happening, or maybe you're having some sort of secondary effect of like how Vortex has a secondary effect of a degen. You could have some sort of secondary effect of a skill during its channel, and then a primary effect on its actual like when you finish the channel, I guess.
Yeah, we could very easily. I think I might be lying. We'll have to ask a programmer and get told no. Have a support gem that's like you take reduced damage while you're channeling, linked skills. Something
Fortify
like that
while channeling.
Something like that might be interesting.
Yeah, that is like that. It opens up a lot more opportunities. I can definitely see why you're excited to talk about this channeling skill change, because it didn't seem obvious at first what you were kind of going for, but when you mentioned that it's becoming a mechanic that you guys can play with, that is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'm not sure how soon we'll get that kind of thing, or even if some of it is feasible. But that's the sort of thing that makes us excited about this change. Why it's a big deal for the game, even if not just for this patch.
And to emphasize, like kind of like what people can expect from existing skills is generally a better like gameplay feel. So in particular, if people who play Flame Blast know that like casting Flame Blast is pretty awkward until you learn this kind of like where you're channeling and then you like move, and then to make it cast, like you actually have to move your character to make it pop properly. Otherwise, it feels really awkward. So that'll be removed essentially. That'll be fixed.
Yep.
And this will also work for totems then as well, right, Rory?
We're still working out how to get totems to cast it intelligently, because it turns out you can't just tell AI to channel with a system that lets them cast indefinitely and not know how to stop. But yeah, it will apply to them. They will have a better system for it. I don't know whether it'll mean that Flame Blast Totems will know when to stop casting Flame Blast. They'll probably just keep going forever. But
feels bad.
Auto cast on 10 stacks or something. But that said, though, you do have like some exiles and some bosses that use Flame Blast, and some of them use it kind of intelligently too. At least one of them is pretty gnarly, because he'll cast like 5-stack Flame Blast on you, whereas one charges up 10 stacks every time. So you must have that tech there.
That sort of we cheat with a lot of that stuff. We have like special versions of the skill that cast exactly this number of times.
I see.
There's a lot of stuff that we don't want the programmers to know about that we do for monsters to get that stuff to work nicely. I'm sure there are no programmers listening.
So Magnus is a cheater.
Yeah, pretty much.
How does Magnus get it, but our totems go? I mean, can we just have our totems be Magnus in nature?
I don't know how to answer that.
Just say that to Jonathan. Say, Jonathan, can Flame Blast beat Magnus on totems? Boom, problem solved. You are now Magnus. Hell, make it a Chieftain node. Screw it. So with that said, you're obviously reworking channeling. Speculation is there. Are we expected to see new channeling skills? Because if we have a chaos skill that kind of channels like Wither and Fire, Incinerate, Flame Blast, and even kind of channeling Lightning Tendrils, we don't have a Frost one. Is speculation allowed to speculate here?
There's a lot that we want to do. I can't tell you which ones we're gonna do, but we're gonna have some cool stuff. There's some stuff that I'm like, this is what I want to play next league, so it's got to be good. Um, yeah, some cool stuff.
I
Some
mean,
cool stuff. That's all I
what
can
I
say.
remember of Diablo 3 was there was Frozen Ray or whatever it was. That thing was you just channeled Frozen Beam of Death, and I would love to see something like that. And make it happen. Make it happen. But then again, I'm not
I'll
the
do
game
what I
dev.
can. I'll do what I can.
Thank you, Rory. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I've been wanting a very particular channeled bow skill for a very long time, and I'm hoping these changes might enable something like that, and that you guys aren't only giving love to spells with the channeled action, and maybe considering interesting things that could happen with bows, and even melee could be interesting.
I can't talk about any stuff that we haven't released yet, so maybe.
Definite maybe with a question mark.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely maybe. You heard it here first, folks. The very
50% chance of a probably.
of a probably. Okay. All right.
That's like an Anchorman quote. 60% of the time it works every time. Like what? Are you from like? Is this the Kiwi version of Anchorman, Rory? Like what? All right, so we're pretty much running out of time. We have 7 minutes to discuss whatever you want. I mean, Ziggy, is there anything you would like to touch upon that we really, we skipped over to make sure we talked about these channeling changes?
I'd like to shout out the community unique Rory and I have been working on. Do you know how the current step is going, Rory, with the selection of name and flavor text options?
I know Bex is dreading looking through the hundreds and hundreds of suggestions that we've got, but no, it's at the stage now where Bex is going to take a look at the list. This is probably the last day to put your suggestions in for name and flavor text, and then we'll start going through and picking our favorites, and then we'll have the vote on that list once we've picked our favorites from the list.
Cool.
So,
yeah, I don't envy
yeah.
Bex that job. I've had to do that for giveaways before. It's a bit gnarly searching through hundreds of responses, trying to find how do you pick like 4 favorites from hundreds of responses?
Yeah. What is good flavor text and name? What is words really when you think about it? So it's going to be tricky.
I actually want to ask you that question. What is good flavor text and a name, Rory? Like, what is good flavor text and a name? Can you answer that question? You asked that question. Can you answer it?
Something that tells a novel worth of a story in a couple of lines. That's good name and flavor text there. So, easy peasy. Just do it. Just do it.
just do it. Nice. How okay are you with meme submissions though? Like particularly memey submissions?
It's got to be very cleverly veiled.
Yeah.
I wanted to take the "My wife left me" post and turn that into a suggestion where it was talking about how Doresso's love left him. Just really subtle it up. But
that'd be awesome though.
Write something, guys. You got a day. Go.
Yeah, someone translate the "My wife left me" meme into an actual submission, and we'll do it. We'll put it in there. Maybe. No promises. 50% of a probably.
Oh my god. Isn't that like the whole fishing thing? The whole fishing thing, that Star of Ray class is already like, it's already memed out. There's always tinfoil theories about this fishing secrets behind the star. What is it? Is it the Star of Ray class, Rory? The unique neck? The ruby?
I can't comment on any potential probable fishing secrets.
I mean,
I finally got my fishing up to 364B, so I can't really, yeah, there's no more to say about it.
Back in Torment, there was an illegal fisherman, and there was this tinfoil hat theory that if you wore Fairgrave's crown or tricorn,